Thank you very much for being here. Thanks. I'm going to start things off, if that's okay. Derek, if I can start with you, please, if that's all right. What was the attraction to this novel and this story for you to start with?
When I first read it, I was just so taken with the emotion of it. I was on the subway train in Brooklyn and I was crying during rush hour, and it was so embarrassing to be crying. But I felt like if anyone else was reading what I was reading, they would be crying too. Eventually, when I wrote the script, I sent it to these guys. They were crying when they read it. They told me. Basically, I wanted to do it because I wanted to cry more, basically.
And make other people cry.
I guess so.
There's a cryometer at the end of every viewing of the film. Alicia, for you, this character is a wonderful journey and arc that she has as a character for you. Was that a lot of fun to explore and to delve into?
Definitely. She's an interesting character and quite complex. When you find her at the beginning of the story, her alongside most people all people at this time after the First World War had gone through loss, with a generation wiped out, and she's still young. She's coming of age period of her becoming a woman. She's still quite naive, but she has this immense amount of life spirit within her, and I loved that both the book and in the script that I read, there's element of this young woman that is almost unlikable at the beginning because she's so upfront. She kind of acts and says things without thinking, but it all comes down to that she never does anything without it coming straight from the heart. She wants to do good, and I admire her for having this, she's in a home where it's mourning, for her brothers that have passed, and yet she just wants to believe in life and create life and believe in love and want to find a husband and create a family. So it's a big arc of her becoming a mother and a woman in this story, and it's interesting, I think, for actors, for both me and Michael, to play ordinary good people, but that of course sometimes make not the best decisions in life, and I think that's relatable, that they're flawed, but they only act with true emotion and goodness.
Michael, from the kind of first scene that we have of Tom, there seems to be a tremendous backstory to him in terms of what he's gone through to get to the point where we meet him. Was that something that you and Derek kind of talked about and explored?
Yeah, absolutely. I just love this little recorder here. I know it's.
We were just talking about this variety.
That's amazing.
The smallest one I've seen in a long time.
Very cool.
It's not a competition.
I'm drawn to it.
You won.
Tom's backstory.
It was something that Derek and I talked about. I guess we sort of talked about lots of things. We'd sort of go for walks and chat about life and things that weren't relating to the film, but definitely what Tom is bringing with him when we meet him. We know I was very aware that I had to sort of that it had to be sort of written on his face, in his soul, that he's almost carrying this sort of shadow of death and France and trench warfare and just the horrors of World War I with him. Because it's such it's everything about him is that war. The fact that he survived it, he's carrying this sort of survivor's guilt with him, and the fact that he seeks a job that's going to put him in absolute isolation. So for sure, that was something that I was very focused on.
Okay, we'll open up to the floor, please. Gentleman in the front row, he's had his hand up for 40 minutes waiting.
Yeah.
Wow.
First question.
Alicia, first of all, I'd like to compliment you on your accent. You've not only got the Australian accent right, you've got the West Australian accent right.
Oh, that's good. Well, I've been in Perth shooting a film, so maybe I picked up something without knowing. But you're being just very kind. Thank you. We had a lot of haunt. Oh my God, our dialect coach was.
Did you use a dialogue coach, and how much work did you do on getting the accent so right?
Well, thank you. I was terrified each day of trying to do any accent on this film. But I mean, we started with discussing if we should do like an RP accent, knowing that, of course, that a lot of the Australian sounds came along after the Second World War. And but when we met our dialect coach, she said that I think there's a way of morphing in, you know, that it is the beginning of what we now consider is the Australian sound. So we tried to kind of find that own voice in the same way that Padishers is actually a fictional town in Australia, and try to find a voice of that period was very important. But yeah, it was the whip was out there, and she spent a lot of hours trying to. It was a lot of frustration going on, but it's always wonderful with an accent. I mean, me working now in not even my native language, it's actually a tool that makes you come to work every morning, and if you've done the preparation work, you kind of have a tool that brings you back into character immediately. And so when you find that voice, when I found Isabel's voice, it's excitement in that, and that you can go, it's a fast track to get into her every day.
Okay,
Thank you.
lady in the front here.
Derek, how important is the theme of religion, or more broadly faith, in the film? And Alicia and Michael, in what ways does it shape your characters and their actions?
Yeah, religion, you know, for me, I grew up Catholic. What do they call that, a recovering Catholic now, I guess, is what they say. I feel like that you asked the question about Tom, like how does he come into the movie, and I feel like he's almost, he can't live anymore. He has so much guilt, you know, and for me as like a Catholic, I also have like so much guilt about every move I make in life, every choice I make, and so these characters definitely live in that world that's kind of, especially Tom at the beginning of the movie, it's just kind of cloud over him of guilt, of sin, you know, and throughout the course of the movie and of the story, one of the things I loved about it is it's ultimately a movie about forgiveness, you know, a forgiveness of his sins, of their sins, of the human error, really. You know, to me, this movie was ultimately just a human story, right, about humans that make mistakes. They make mistakes, you know, based with you know, with good intentions, and so to me that was really the role of religion, was kind of forgiving, you know, for people, forgiving other people for just being human. You know.
I agree with that. That was just what I thought when you asked the question. I think that's, you know, with these characters having not only to go through their own private dilemma, but also in where this film is set after the First World War, and all the kind of guilt and the horrors that people, the actions that people done, and what people have been through and put through. And so I think that is kind of, if there is a larger message, it's that fact that we all kind of relate to these characters. Normally in stories nowadays, I think you try to find a protagonist and a villain, and you can't really in this story, and that's the beauty that you feel for all these three characters, even the ones that have made a terrible, terrible choice, because in the end, they find a way of you know, taking responsibility of their actions and find a way forward, and for people to forgive.
What's the actual question? I'm sorry, I'm still smarting about my Perth accent. Go on.
Religion, or more broadly faith, shaped your character and his actions for you?
I think, you know, at the time that we're dealing with, religion probably played, well, it did play more of a role in everyday society. I think for Tom personally, and his experiences in the war, I believe that he's a religious person. In the book, it says that, you know, that he makes a pact with God about, you know, if he gets out of this alive, that he promises not to bring any harm to another sort of human being again. And so I think perhaps being in that scenario as a soldier, and being so close to death, and the possibility of dying, one would sort of find a newfound faith if you didn't have one already. So for sure, I think he's somebody that believes in God, and that that there will be consequences for one's actions here in this life and the next.
Elliot, in the second row question.
Hi, so this is a very emotional story, as has already been said. How do you prevent this kind of story from tipping into melodrama as a director and as actors? Because I imagine it's quite a fine line to tread. I think you succeed.
You know, I grew up like watching a lot of melodramas. I always loved them. Douglas Sirk movies. I loved, Powell and Pressburger's movies. I love Victor Fleming and David Lean. And I also grew up watching Days of Our Lives because my mom had Days of Our Lives on every day. So my entire childhood, like sands through the hourglass, so were the Days of Our Lives. Like it was always on in my house. So it's like, to me, like melodrama, I don't understand really I don't really understand that genre. I just understand like truth and emotional truth. And I also understand when you're making a movie about these characters that are making these emotional decisions, that their emotions have to be heightened. Like for me, anytime I'm emotional, I usually regret it. You know, like crying on the subway train, I was so embarrassed, I regret it. Being on the sideline of my son's soccer team, yelling at another parent, I regret it afterwards. Like no matter, always, I would just regret my emotions. And these characters are emotional. They're in such a ripe emotional state all the time in the movie. So I think all we thought about was trying to approach those emotional moments as honestly as possible. And I had two of the greatest actors on the planet like attacking that with me, and we were all kind of like the truth meters for each other. And anytime I think we felt like we were pushing, it wasn't right. You know, it was actually when there was a time like early on, I have to say, I must confess, like when Michael cried early on in the movie, I thought to myself, yeah, way to go. Like, he cried.
This crying thing again.
I know, but like 8 weeks into it, we would be together before a scene saying, whatever we do, let's not cry. And he was like, yeah, I don't want to cry anymore. But it was so ripe with emotion, we couldn't stop crying. The whole movie was just like snotty crying the whole time while we were shooting it. We couldn't help it.
But what is the definition of a melodrama?
Yeah,
that's the
I think
question.
that's
The melodrama is it's a scenario, isn't it, where the good is good, the bad is bad, and they're played pretty sort of one-dimensionally like that. I've called this film melodrama as well at times, but in a weird way, the good people are making bad choices. It's an interesting thing in terms of like emotionally, if something becomes sort of overweighted, let's say, and sort of becomes too much for an audience, if it's too heavily weighted in the emotional realm as opposed to a story or narrative. I don't know. That really, as a performer, that's the director. That's really in the director's hands. All that we do as performers is try and give as many options in a given scenario. So if we're doing a scene, we play it with different intentions and different emotional content, or different activities to get what you want, and then it'll really be up to the director to sort of to mold that vision.
Great. You all right over there? Just checking. Lady, it's quite noisy over there.
Bingo balls over there. Legs
Lady
11.
How significant was the kind of remote nature of the locations? I mean, did you feel more like you were living in the movie more than you might on somewhere where you kind of go back to a metropolitan hotel at the end of the day?
It's not, I mean, you're not living in the movie in the sense of the story. It's I think, the beauty of, it's special. I mean, I've done a few films now when you end up going away on location with a crew and you're there as a team and you're kind of living close to each other, and if you do it in London and everyone just goes home to their family and islands in the end of the day, that's one thing, but you create a community and work very intensely and tight together in all departments, and that gives a lot. And then Derek really wanted us to try and be out on the set, and I think we first, maybe I felt even more because of the emotional aspect of this film that I felt like I had to kind of go back to my hotel and feel like I could have a proper dinner and relax and then get back on the horse and try and do, the next day. But then you got out there, and one of the the best perks of this job is that you end up getting to go to places that I don't know how I would have ended up there if it wasn't for my job bringing me there. And then I arrived on set, and a lot of people have told me to go to New Zealand and see the nature and that it's extraordinary. But it's one of those things, it's not until you find yourself there, you're like, every morning, every evening, I saw a new sunset and a sunrise, and then the opportunity. When I met Derek, and I didn't have the role, we met and we chatted in my audition, and he said, well, I expect my actors to fail and to surprise me, and in return I will give them experiences. And this was one that I felt like I didn't want to, I think all of us agreed, the actors and the crew, when we got out there, that this is kind of cool. It was Monday to Friday, and then we were able to go back to our little town in the weekends, but to kind of experience that nature, and also, I've never felt so small in the world, and you kind of realize also, it wasn't inside also for the characters to kind of realize what that kind of isolation means, and the wind that never stops moving. It kind of could drive you mad at night.
Derek, was it an easy location to find in terms of the right place to film?
No.
He wanted to find an island.
No,
He was really angry.
Yeah, I was.
When he
The only island, there was like...
it was a peninsula, don't tell
I
him.
spent like 6 months trying to find the perfect place, and all over Australia, New Zealand. We were going to shoot in Australia, but then Pirates of the Caribbean came into town and they took all of the tax credit away, so we couldn't afford to shoot there. Anyway, Pirates of the Caribbean 5. So we had to go find another spot, and we went to New Zealand, which is, such a gorgeous country. It's further south, so the light was really beautiful there. It's always like really kind of low in the sky. There was many great islands that had lighthouses on them, but they also had like indigenous populations of protected lizards, so people couldn't go on those. And then there was a great island we found, but the lighthouse was, stumpy, and it didn't quite. Thank you, Michael. And so we found this place, and the only reason I agreed to even look at it was that I found that it was an hour and a half away on a bumpy dirt road from any other, civilization, from any other town or cute hotel. And I always wanted to really live there. I like going to camp when I'm making a movie. I thought the isolation would kind of play in. It would kind of be an X factor to us in making the movie. And I think it was in some ways. It was, I don't know. We had nowhere to go. We didn't have technology to escape to. We didn't have many distractions out there. We just had each other, and we had a very small crew. And I was very thankful that these guys agreed to doing it, that way. Thanks, guys. I hope you.
Lady here with a question, then we'll go to the back. Yeah?
Hi, it's a question for Michael. I know they say never work with children or animals. How did you find it working with the babies?
Babies. I guess they're either crying or not. So
We had twins.
sometimes it's good
sorts
when they're
them out.
crying, and the babies. There's not a lot you can do. I mean, kids. You can work with kids because they can talk and express themselves. But I've always found that with children, and when they have to adhere to a script, they can sometimes tense up or freeze up or be quite rigid. But when they're improvising, they're magical, and they're, like I've said before, that's sort of like a stream of consciousness. It just comes flowing out of them, and they've got such freedom within their imagination, and it's actually quite hard to keep up with them and to be quick-witted and have a response for them. They don't like to repeat things, which I totally understand. They don't want to go again. It's unnatural, and they're right. But I've always found it to be, it can learn a lot from working with kids. That sort of magic element, that just the enjoyment of creating an imaginary world and filling it unquestioningly. There's no doubt in them when they're if they're playing, cowboys and Indians, or if they're in a doll's house. It's happening, it's real. That commitment to the imagination is pretty intoxicating.
Did it make you broody at all?
I like kids.
Lady at the back, please.
I was just going to go back to the locations question. As actors, when you get taken to these amazing places, obviously you don't get very much time to, check out the areas. Do you ever have the time to go back and maybe go backpacking or want to do something like that, just to kind of be?
Actually, I would say when we do these kind of tours, you don't see anything. I mean, then you're in a hotel room and you can kind of have been to both cities and continents that you've never been to, but anyone asks what it was like, you have no idea. But of course, I mean, from Monday to Friday, some Saturdays we worked, around the clock, and that's it. But the beautiful thing, if you're making a film in one city, first of all, there's of course a lot of us that fly in, but when you're coming to a town, you also use local crew, and suddenly you end up actually spending 2-3 months with people that you normally don't do as tourists. You actually meet the people from that place where you're at the moment, and then if you have weekends, which we did, you actually get the chance to kind of get their recommendations. They know people, maybe you go to that. So we did like hikings and went on trips and around the island. It's great vineyards, Marlborough. So that it's when you end up having a film production that actually is based for a few weeks or sometimes months, that is a wonderful experience to get a real insight into a place. Yes, I did that. I love that.
Okay, we've got time for 2 more questions. We're going to go, actually, we'll do those 3 there, at the back, and then there, please. Thanks. So, lady with blonde hair, right there, sorry.
Michael, question for you. I feel like I've just seen you in Trespass Against Us, which totally different role, obviously. And are there certain roles that are easier to prep for, or characters that you can shake off easier or quicker? Because I had to shake you off from Trespass Against Us to watch you as this character.
It just really depends on the amount of time you've got going into it. I mean, I suppose that's the hard thing. Sometimes you've got, 6 weeks to 2 months, that you're going into the job afterwards, so you can prepare accordingly. Then other times it might just be 2 weeks.
Can you get rid of someone quite easily, or are there certain people that you carry with you because you've been that person?
I suppose, the thing is, if I'm going into another job, it's a very easy way to cleanse the other person out, because it's just about getting the new person right. It sounds like I'm going to be nuts in a few years. I'll be in an old people's home, like here comes this Macbeth again. Jesus.
Here's Frank.
Flashbacks. So it's actually kind of a good way to just sort of clear the decks and you start again. And it's sort of been like that over the last sort of, I suppose, 5 or 6 years, where I've kind of gone from job to job. So literally, Trespass was right before this job, funny enough. I went straight from Trespass to Light Between Oceans, yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
right
Thanks.
behind you. Yes, hello, what's your question?
Your characters are so different. They've got different personalities and complexities. And on screen, you were able to really make their relationship convincing. What did you two feel was the most challenging aspects of the characters that you played? And then, second prong, from Derek's point of view, what were the surprises Michael and Alicia brought to the role?
I think that the biggest challenge taking on Isabel was the fact that I wanted, when I read it, again, I mentioned it a bit earlier, but I love the fact that I didn't immediately fall in love with this character. I found her, I was impressed by her kind of energy and force, but she was also, like I said, a girl who sometimes was a bit naive and outspoken and young and wanted to say that she knew everything about everything, but then of course she goes on a journey and really is faced by the experiences of life, the pros and cons. And so the important was for me, because in this story you kind of, for it to work, when I read the book, you ended up feeling for her, and well, I did at least. But I remember when I had read the book and I went in on bookreads.com, and I love the discussions going on about, people having different opinions about her. And I wanted that to still be there, that she wasn't a simple person, that she had all these different elements to her, and that she, had those unlikable, sides to her, and yet you would believe that it was truly by emotion and by pure heart that she made this bad decision that she did, and that she by the end kind of know the mistake that she did, and that she really just wanted to continue her life. So to pay tribute to that and honor that, and also to try and portray a mother, which I'm not, and trying to get an insight what it would be like in a situation, because that's such a big trauma in this film, the miscarriage and the loss of those children.
Michael, what about for you?
Yeah, I suppose it's, reading a character, you start to visualize the character in your head and what they represent, and it's just sort of, coming to a physical place with that. It's kind of difficult with all characters. I suppose with Tom, when I read it, I was so taken to him. He's like a hero to me. It seems like he's a man from a bygone era. That they don't make him like that anymore. He's sort of, there's a stoicism to him. He's a quiet man. He doesn't vocalize what he's feeling, yet he's, there's huge dignity to him and loyalty, and there was a strength to him. I just thought, wow, this is a great, this is a great man, and somebody that I would aspire to try and be like. I suppose that was the difficulty, but it's always hard. I think it's just sort of wondering or not whether you've come to a place that your imagination has sort of presented this character to you, and whether you're physically embodying it or not. And it's very hard to even tell whether you are or not. That's where the director comes into play and, gives you assurances or say, what the fuck are you doing?
Derek, what about for you? What were the surprises that...
Well, I'll just say that it's only like when I spend all this time writing something or adapting something, I'm so sick of it by the time I'm on set shooting it, because I've just seen it in my head all the time. And to get on set and have it to start to become real, and to have these two great actors start living in these roles, that's to me the most thrilling moment of my life. And in the course of your life, I mean, as a director, there's like so few days you actually get to shoot. But to me, that's where the essence is. And so, just like my personal experience making this film, like observing these guys, was like, to me, Michael, I hope it's okay if he was like the heavyweight champ. And then, like, when you go to a fight with the heavyweight champ, you got to show up. So Alicia showed up, and she was like the thoroughbred. And so the heavyweight champ was used to getting someone down in the second round, but here's was this thoroughbred who kept running. And so they kept raising this bar for each other on set, and it was so, like, just wonderful to watch these two great performers just kind of raising the bar and kind of pushing each other. I didn't have to do much pushing because they were doing it for each other. Well, sorry. And then what was beautiful to see was when they like had each other's backs, and only like one time did they like team up against me. So that was surprising.
When was that?
You remember. Don't act like you don't remember. Yeah. You said some things you can't take back.
And we're going to finish where we started off with the gentleman in the front row, please.
Question for all three of you. You managed to have three Aussie acting legends in the film with you: Jack Thompson, Brian Brown, and Gary McDonald. How were they to work with?
Amazing. I was so glad to see Jack again. I met him in Venice, and weirdly enough, I met him in Vegas before that. Sat on a bar. Suddenly Jack Thompson walks up. No, I mean, I think I'm the beginning of my career, so every time I get to work with actors that I look up to and I've seen their work, and suddenly, not only get the chance to kind of shake their hands and tell them how much I appreciate them, and then get the chance to work with them is always, extremely humbling.
Yeah, I had met Brian Brown before at a party, and I started doing my best cocktail impersonation. Coughlin's Law. Anyway, so it was great to work with him, you know, and Jack Thompson, Gary as well. There's a sort of musicality to them, and with Jack as well. There's, you know, he's a poet as well as anything else. They've just got a real knack for storytelling. I don't know, is that because of their Irish heritage, you know, all the convicts that went out to Australia. But there's a natural gift that Australians have for storytelling, I find. And I think you can see it with the sort of talent that comes out of the country, you know. There's a great humanity to Australian sort of artists and performers, that they sort of also have an understanding of the land and the harshness of the environment and what it can throw at you. So it was a blast. Gary sort of just improvising as well at the sort of wedding scene was hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, like for me, I had no idea who like Norman Gunston was, you know, but he was Borat before Borat, right? He's like the original Ali G. He's the best and the bravest, and they were all such a pleasure. All the Australian cast. I have to give some credit to Ben Mendelsohn. He pretty much cast the whole Australian portion of this movie.
Okay.
Well, I just asked him. I said, "Who should be in this movie, Ben?" He was like, "Well, you know." He's like,
That's
"Mate,
amazing.
he's like, you got to use Jack Thompson, you know." Anyway, so give it up to Ben. Yeah.
And you know, full credit, to Derek as well. I have to say, you know, in the casting process, you know, there was, you know, he always searching for truth, and whether or not somebody is known on the scene or not. There was always, you know, as an actor before that was trying to get cast in something, and you always look for those directors that are open to a fresh face or a name that's not on a list. And you know, I think, you know, Derek, amongst other of his, you know, great traits, that's one fantastic one that gives opportunity to those that don't always get it, I would say.
Thank you.
And then I cut him out of the film. Cut. Sorry.
Derek, Alicia, Michael, thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey